On today's show, we have on Coach Aaron Sutton, head coach of the Montana State University baseball program, and soon to be the manager for the Minnesota Twins High A team in Fort Myers, Florida. And we're talking coaching from the coaching side, the administrative side, and the business side.
Welcome to another episode of the Baseball Awakening Podcast, where we dive into the raw, unfiltered, unsexy side of player development. Get ready for some knowledge bombs with your host, Geoff Rottmayer.
Welcome to the Baseball Awakening Podcast. I'm Geoff Rottmayer. Today, I'm sitting down with Coach Aaron Sutton, head coach of the Montana State University Billings Yellow Jackets, and soon to be the manager of the Minnesota Twins High A affiliate team. Coach Sutton had a very strong and a very accomplished coaching career. He was the head coach at Treasure Valley Community College, where he went on to win the Northwest Atlantic Conference East Region Coach of the Year 3 times before taking over at Montana State University in 2017. He continued to have success breaking numerous school record and conference record and leading the program to the very first ever GNAC championship title and the program's very first berth into the NCAA Division II West Region Championship. So a lot of success and a guy we're excited to learn a lot from today. Coach, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Geoff. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Listen, Coach, I'm excited to learn from you today, and I'm sure everyone that's listening in is as well. But let's just kind of start to get to know you a little bit more. So talk a little bit about your path into being a coach, and then maybe some of the coaches that you learned from along the ways.
Yeah, man. I've got a pretty unique story. I'm a small town kid. I'm from Fruitland, Idaho. It's a one stoplight town. Was very fortunate, man. Like growing up, being around some pretty good baseball minds. Went from Fruitland to a junior college down the road, Treasure Valley CC, and I played for a guy by the name of Russ Wright. Our hitting coach, that's actually his dad. So Russ is in the ABCA Hall of Fame. Just a tremendous baseball mind, and he was really the first guy that taught me that there's more to this game than just showing up, throwing, hitting, and fielding. So I owe a lot to him as far as my development, and actually kind of sparking, my interest into getting into coaching later on down the road. From TVCC, I ended up getting the opportunity to go to Oregon State, and so I got a chance to be around guys like Pat Casey, Marty Lees, Dan Spencer, and all three of those guys had a tremendous impact on me in the short amount of time I was with them. I ended up leaving Oregon State to get a chance to play, and went and finished my career over at Western Oregon University. And Jeremiah Robbins was his first year as a head coach. Coach Robbins and I have a tremendous relationship still to this day. I mean, he moved on to LC State, where I think he won 3 national titles. And it's neat to say that probably all 3 coaches that I got a chance to play for in college are going to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame as far as their resumes and what they've done. And so I owe a lot to them as far as teaching me the game and teaching me how to respect it and appreciate the opportunity to get out there every day.
Very, very cool. So with that, you developed a style, and you've had a lot of success with your coaching style. Can you talk a little bit about your style and then maybe why you think that it works?
Yeah, the other day I had someone in my office, they were asking me about, like, put it into a nutshell, and I think it's hard to define it. But, the one thing I told them, I think probably the most important piece as a coaching staff that we talk about is love your people, man. Love your assistant coaches, love your players, and try to create a family-like atmosphere where everyone understands you care for them, and then they start to put that trust in you, because I think at the end of the day, like, we want to have shared ownership in our program. We communicate a lot with our guys. Development's key for us, like development. That's a big thing for us in our programs, but we also want them to be invested in that as well. So we give a lot of, freedom for them to talk to us about what they're feeling, what their goals are. and then leadership's a big thing for us. So we want player-led culture. So we think that those areas provide our guys the opportunity to lead, to develop as young men. Because at the end of the day, like, you want to win baseball games, but I think if you coach them the right way, you show them you love them, that's just winning going to be a byproduct of all those small things you're doing with them in their everyday lives.
I agree. When we talk about development, this is the word that gets thrown around a lot. What does development mean to you?
I think it's a full-time gig. It's not just on the field. It's off the field. It's teaching them how to be great young men. I think the student athlete experience, a lot of it is baseball, but I think the reason why we've gotten a lot of success, or had a lot of success, and got some really good players, is the fact that they know they're coming into a place where we're going to make them take their hats off when they eat. We're going to teach them how to shake hands properly. We're going to teach them to open doors for people. And I think doing those things, then when you get to the field, like, baseball is the easy part of your day. They're excited to be out there and get coached up and have a plan and stick to the process. Nick Saban, you hear that guy talk about the process until he's blue in the face. And I think we've really tried to embody that everywhere we've gone, as far as keeping your nose down, working hard, and getting better every single day,
Awesome. So let's go back to when you first started out as a coach. You were at Treasure Valley Community College. What had changed since you were there to where we are today? Because a lot of things have changed. The kids are a little bit differently. They're growing up in a different environment. So what has changed? How have you evolved in terms of your style and your approach?
I think, when we were growing up playing, you had that respect for a guy that was a coach, that you did things because they told you to do it and you believed it was the right way. I think now the way we coach and the way you kind of connect with players is you got to show them why. These guys have so much access to technology and information that you've got to be prepared to show them this is the plan and this is why we're going to do it. So I think that's a big change for us because we have those resources now. I mean, when we grew up, you got a bucket of balls, and with your buddy, you went through BP to each other, and you say, "Hey, I think your shoulder's flying open early, or you're collapsing on your backside." That's how you taught yourselves. And now, I mean, you pull out your cell phone and you can get film and you can break it down slow-mo, frame by frame, and so you have to be prepared to coach guys that way. Other things I think as a coach now, like, you got to put your ego aside. Like, you can't have an ego as a coach. It's not my way, it's the best way, and that's going to be different for each individual player. That's going to be different for each individual coach, but finding the best way, because at the end of the day, it's about the results for the players to go have success on the field. So those are two really big areas for me. And then I think the other one is trying to separate how we play the game from practice. Practice time is our time as coaches. Game time is players' time. I don't think when we coach in games, we're not yelling and screaming from the dugout anymore. The game's already hard enough. So trying to take a back seat and let them go perform and have fun and enjoy themselves when they go out and compete. And that's been a pretty good balance for us, and breaking that down and making sure our players understand that you're going to get coached up during the week. But then when we get to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, like that's your time to go have some fun.
That's awesome. That's where things need to head if it's not already. Because like you said, they have the information at their disposal, and you and I both know that knowing just enough is dangerous.
Yeah, it is.
So you had mentioned, your big thing is is the plan, and you put together for guys the player development plan. What does that look like? What's included in this plan?
I think, you look at each guy, and you want to have meetings and communicate with them on what their goals are, and I think if they can be goal oriented into their development, then we as coaches then can dive in and aid them along their process and their road to become who they want to become as a baseball player. So that's where we first start. I mean, we will film guys offensively, on the mound, defensively, and then bring it in and break it down with them. But I also want to know, like, what's their plan when they're showing up to the field every single day, because they've got to understand that this is their career too. Like they should have as much say as we do. So I think that's where it all starts, is getting a base for them, doing a lot of baseline testing, mobility stuff, strength stuff, ball exit speeds. I mean, all those things, I think giving them a baseline and then going to work. And this is how we're going to improve in these areas, and then testing them again so that they get to see, because I think at the end of the day, we know baseball, you got to have a confident mind. Your mind's got to be right. But if you're going through that process and you're developing, your numbers are increasing, and you feel like a better player, then that correlates to confidence on the field. So I think that's a big part of player development, helps us win games because they also get more confident and trust their ability to play as well.
I love it. So when you get a young guy, a freshman, they may or may not have the best social skills, which is kind of becoming a little more common, the lack of social skills. How do you get a guy to openly communicate what his goals are and actually be kind of proactive in the process of putting the plan together? Instead of being a guy that just said, yeah, coach, sure, whatever you want me to do.
Yeah, everyone's different. I mean, you're going to have guys that are breaking their own film down and wanting to come in weekly and talk about those things. And then you're going to have guys that are a little bit more reserved. So as coaches, I think we have to respect each of those personalities. Ways that we try to open up lines of communication in our fall, probably for the last 8 years, everywhere we've been, we do weekly goal sheets. So we have players turning these in every Friday before practice. They turn them into their position player coach, and it has like their goals academically. So we kind of have an idea what they're doing in the classroom, and then also their goals baseball wise on the field for that coming week. So then as coaches, we get to read through those over the weekend. We respond to them by email back to them before Monday so that we have a good plan heading into that week. So that opens up some lines of communication, especially for the guys that aren't really vocal. And then you always have the opportunity to, hey, we're not on the same page, man. You got to come by the office. Let's hash this out and make sure that we got a good plan headed into this week. And I think our players have really appreciated that piece.
Yeah, I was just going to ask what the response was like doing that every single week.
I think, at first you're kind of like, man, it's a lot of work. I got schoolwork and I'm lifting and all this. But then once they get into it and they start to understand like the importance of it and the value, then they really buy into it, and we've only done it in the fall because I think that's a big developmental time for us. Once we get to the spring, I mean, on the road, it's a little tougher to navigate. And we want to make sure if our players are going to put the time into it as coaches, we're able to put that amount of time back for them. But it progresses because at first, like you get guys writing down, like, I want to throw harder, or I want to be a better infielder. Well, like, no, like, let's have purposeful practice. Like, what are you working on today, man? Like, you want to throw harder. Like, let's let it rip 3 out of the 5 days on our pull downs. Be specific in your work. As an infielder, hey, I'm having a tough time going to my glove hand side. Like when we're in BP, like make sure that machine's set up. I'm getting extra ground ball work to my glove side. So just being more purposeful in our practice, and they come to the practice that week with the plan, and then you get done and you evaluate and you go, did I get what I wanted to accomplish?
Very nice. So when I think about this, I think about time commitment involved. So for the coaches that are listening, I would assume, Coach, that when you first started off developing and implementing the system, that it took time. But over time, it became the norm, and it got easier and easier. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think anything you're trying to implement, like, you've got to be organized as a coach, because players can see right through it if you're disorganized. So if you're going to do something, you got to do it all in. That was a big learning curve for me as a young coach. Was like, as a player, you show up and you go to practice, and that's what you think it is. But as a coach, you're there 3 hours before and 3 hours after, and you're losing sleep over it. So you just have to find your routines. And once you start getting that implemented into your routine, just like your players are, like I know every Sunday morning I'm hopping on my computer and I'm filling out goal sheets back to these guys and responding. Then it just becomes a part of who you are. It's just everyday life. It's just like waking up and brushing your teeth.
I think you nailed it right there. It's got to be a part of your routine, and I see it all the time. coaches have the desire to have some success. They want to try something new. And when they go to implement it, it's only within a couple of weeks that they go back to the norm because they haven't stuck with it long enough for it to be a part of their routine. Or maybe it would more work than they expected it to be. But it does pay off if you want to be successful as a coach.
No question. No question.
Okay, so let's go back to your Treasure Valley days when you were the assistant and you are now the head coach. So can you talk a little bit about the difference between being an assistant coach and now being a head coach with more of the administrative side and the business side of things? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was put into a really fortunate situation where, I didn't know I was going to coach baseball. I was doing insurance as soon as I got done with college, and it took me about 30 days to realize that wasn't for me. I walked in, told the guy I was out, and jumped over as a volunteer under Coach Rick Bauman. He's really a big mentor for me. So I was fortunate enough as I worked through that process with him. I was under him for 5 years. He kind of gave me a little bit more each year. He knew he was going to retire. He said, "Hey, Studdy, you get your master's, and I'm going to retire." So by the time I did finish my master's and he was ready to hang him up, I felt like he had prepared me to take over a big job. And I think the biggest thing moving from that assistant role to the head coaching role is he told me, man, no one's jumping in your van anymore, man. You've got to wear that bigger hat and still have that relationship with your players, but also have the separation because you're going to have to be the one that lays the hand down on discipline and all that stuff. But I felt like I stayed the same as far as the coaching side, developing, all that. You just wear a lot of hats, especially at the junior college level. And that business side of it that no one else sees is what makes the program run. So the fundraising, the grade checks, the academic advising, trying to make sure you guys are NCAA eligible to move on. You're placing guys for summer ball. You're recruiting guys. You're trying to place guys at four-year schools. I feel like the JUCO level, that job is going to prepare you for any job you want after baseball. You know what I'm saying? Or if it's going to be at another stop, a four-year school or professional level,
Yeah, I know you're really big on the academic side of things. I know as a player, you received a national award for your academic, which is awesome. So how do you, and I know part of it falls on, the recruiting side of things, of finding the right fit, but when you get a guy in and high school was easy and he's now just getting hammered with the workload, and he probably didn't expect that type of workload on top of the schedule. How do you get guys motivated and staying on top of their academics?
I think, a big piece of it is make sure that they understand it's important for you and for them. We have a player's handbook, and our number one goal is to graduate all of our sophomores when I was at JUCO, and now it's all of our seniors. So I think it's important for them to know that's a big goal for them. And one thing we really talk to our players a lot about is, being great isn't just a part-time job. If you're going to be great on the field, you're great all the time, off the field, in the classroom, in the weight room, as a boyfriend, as a son. So that's a thing I think for them to kind of take that mindset that if I'm going to have success in life, it's in all avenues, not just baseball. And then show them you care by keeping them accountable. All this stuff, grade checks, the weekly goal sheets are big for us. We do study hall hours. We have academic meetings with guys. We had our guys print off all their schedules, and we track them and do classroom checks and all that, because if they see you putting in the effort and they know that you care, that them getting their academics done and getting the degree is important to you, they're gonna own that a lot more as well.
Awesome. So at the JUCO level, the rules and the regulations are a bit different than where you are now at Montana State, a Division II program. Can you talk about the difference in terms of the practice, the academic, and the recruiting side of things?
Yeah, there's a lot of, JUCO is kind of like the Wild Wild West. There's not as many rules, there's more scholarships available. You can get pretty much any kid into school. So that transition was a little difficult for me moving on to an NCAA Division II program. Obviously, you have care log hours where you're limited to your time with the guys. So that was a big adjustment for us as far as how we organize practice, and then also what's the importance of what we're working on in practice. You know, we don't have 5 different bunt plays and 7 different first and thirds and pick plays, because I don't feel like those are things that we needed to put our time into, you know, so you have to really find that balance of what's going to really help you win ball games. The recruiting piece is a little more difficult, because now you've got to check the transcript. You've got to make sure that they're a qualifier out of high school, and then especially the JUCO guys. That's one area that I'm pretty passionate about moving on from a junior college to the 4-year level. Is a lot of these guys go to junior college and they don't get advised properly. You know, we go to recruit a kid and we get a transcript, and I'm going, dude, you got to go NAIA. Like, you got no shot getting into the NCAA school. So making sure that you're recruiting those guys and then informing them of what they need to do academically to get themselves in a position to get to the school that they want, you know? So those were things that I think were the biggest adjustments, was getting our practices organized, and then also making sure the recruiting side of things, like we're recruiting the right guys.
Yeah, awesome. So let's talk about, and we're still in your Treasure Valley days, when guys are first reporting, you know, at the end of summer. What does this look like when they first come in, you know, and it's probably similar to what you're doing now, you know, at Montana State, but in terms of in terms of practice and getting everyone on the same page and understanding what the expectations are of you and of them, can you kind of take us through that process?
You know, one thing that's important that I always felt like in the recruiting process, like your expectations of your student athletes should be clearly communicated then. So when guys show up on campus in the fall, they know what's expected. You know, we run kind of a tight ship. I mean, you guys got to have clean cut haircuts. We all wear our pants up, you know, kind of a blue collar mentality look. So I think that's clearly communicated in the recruiting process. So they understand when they show up on campus, they know exactly what they're getting themselves into, you know. Once they get in the fall, junior college, you know, the nice thing is you get them in early. You know, we used to bring them in 2 weeks before school started. So it's, you know, 2 or 3 days practice for 14 days, and you really get to kind of implement everything. And then I always felt like the fall was about 2 things: developing and competing. So we really try to tie both of those avenues into our practice plans and the way we went about, you know, scheduling things for our players. The winter, once you moved it inside, it was focused all on development. Take the results away. Like, let's really break film down. Let's have a plan, and let's get after a skill set that we're trying to improve. And then once you move into the spring, I feel like the hard work's been done, man. Like, that's the reward. So it's more about performance, you know, and especially at a junior college where these guys came to you for the sole purpose to develop them and get them the opportunity to move on to the next level. So that springtime is about maintenance, still developing, but also it's about going out and showing out now, boys, you know.
Awesome. So when you say that the fall is about developing and competing, can you take us through what a typical week would look like?
Yeah, you know, I think as far as junior college went, we lifted 3 days a week. Strength was a big piece for us. A lot of guys are physically underdeveloped. So we would lift Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, early in the morning, 6 a.m. We'd get after it. We'd practice at least 6 days a week. We typically try to give them Sundays off. So as we would go through that week, early in the week would be a lot of skill set development stuff. Middle of the week, we would try to get more team oriented. And then by the end of the week, like, we're strapping it on and we're scrimmaging and we're playing as many innings of baseball as we can. So I think it kind of aligns with what you do in the spring, but just at a higher intensity and a higher level, because now you don't have to worry about the result on the weekends. Let's go put it to test and see how we do against each other type of deal.
Yeah. So how do you keep a big picture focus? Because when you talk to coaches, time frame is a thing, and it always will be a thing. So instead of saying we have just 2 months, instead of just saying, you know, I really just have 2 to 4 years, you know, how do you work that in terms of, you know, how fast guys are developing versus what you were expecting?
I think the big picture, at the junior college level is getting them the opportunity to move on, but also competing for a championship. I mean, I think winning is very crucial to players' development and competing, understanding the importance of that. So really early, we would communicate right away, hey, our goal is to graduate you, to get you a 4-year program opportunity, and to win a championship. And then, hey, listen, like, that's the last time we're going to talk about it. Like, we know that's the expectation and where we want to go. Now we got to get back to the process, man. Like, getting better every single day and keeping our nose down and taking every opportunity for what it is. And I thought the guys that could really buy into that mentality were the ones that typically made the biggest jumps and typically had the best opportunity when their careers were done for us there.
Yeah. So what do you do with the guys that are not all in? They're not developing like you thought you would or could. What's the conversation like with them, or what do you do with those guys?
I think honesty is always the big piece. Like, whether they want to hear it or not, they need to hear it, so having those tough conversations in the office. The one thing I think as a coach, you as you move through your career, you're going to find out, like, they don't always know the conversations and things you're telling them right now are the best in the moment. But down the road, they're going to realize that at some point. I mean, every year I get a text message from a guy that I had no idea that he was listening or he cared what we were talking about, but it's like, hey, coach, just want to reach out and say, I really appreciate what you did for me, 8 years ago. That really turned me into who I am today, so having those conversations are vital for their success and their development in the long run. And you're going to run into kids that maybe they don't have the work ethic or they don't have the buy-in, but you recruited them to be there. So try to get the most out of them. That's one thing I've always told all of our coaches, like, hey, we recruited them. Like, you never give up on a player. Like, you continue to push, you continue to coach them, because at some point it's going to click for them. And some it doesn't. But at least you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I gave it my all for those kids,
Yeah. So what about the kid? He is, he's your favorite. He puts in the work, he listens, he does everything you ask. He works hard, but the result isn't what he was expecting or hoping. What's that conversation like to keep him going?
Those are the tough ones, man. I mean, we all have them. Like that practice all-star that's pushing the guy in front, and the guy in front of him maybe is more talented and gets more opportunities. I think it's easy to overlook those guys. So I think making sure you're paying attention to everyone on the team, and then defining roles for every guy on the team. A big thing we have here is we don't compete against each other. We compete for each other. So understanding that we might have 2 or 3 guys at that spot competing, but our goal is to be at our absolute best, so that when the guy that gets to play, like, we prepared him as a team, and I feel shared ownership in his development, and our success as a team is a result of me giving my all every single day. So if you can get guys to buy into that, I know as hard as it sounds, or for them to realize like that, I think you recruit the right kids, like, they're going to understand that process. And then when it is their turn, like, that's the most rewarding thing, man. When those guys do get their opportunity and they take it and they run with it, like, man, that's a great day. That's a great relationship you're going to have with those kids moving on.
Yeah. Awesome. So what about, and we're still talking at the JUCO level. What's the fall? Because you had mentioned that you have the administrative duties, the fundraising, recruiting, and all that stuff. But what's the main focus on the administrative side of coaching during the fall?
Yeah, I think everyone's a little bit different. I think the administrative side of things at the junior college in the fall, you're really putting an emphasis on recruiting. You're also putting an emphasis on your fundraising. I know there's not a lot of JUCOs out there that are fully funded and can get anything they want. So you've got to find avenues to raise money to make things go. I think you're also looking at promoting your players to 4-year institutions. We were always really detailed in writing reports on our guys, getting film of them during the fall to send out to schools and colleges, so that when they look at those emails, like, they have good content for them to look at. I think the summer ball piece is another piece that you're looking at in the fall as well. And then obviously academics. I mean, making sure those guys are in line with getting themselves prepared to graduate and be, NCAA eligible afterwards. But those are probably the biggest pools that you're putting your focus into, especially in the fall.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple times the summer ball. Are you a big fan of the summer ball for the college guys?
Yeah, I think it depends on the situation. The more I've been in it, I love our hitters to go out and get at bats and play up a level and get challenged. Pitchers more detailed as far as inning limits and, what was their workload like in the spring, or, hey, this guy had a really good spring. Let's get him out in summer, finish it out, and then shut him down in the fall. So just that communication with the player and your plan for them, I think, is crucial throughout that process. I think summer ball plays a great role for guys' development. But you also have to make sure, don't just send your guys out and turn them loose and don't check in. Like, make sure you're communicating them through the summer. I mean, there's been times where we pulled guys home just because, hey, body's beat up, coach, I got to get home. I want to get ready for the fall and those types of things. And also making sure that it's not them just copping out and wanting to go hang out at the lake and relax too. Like, they made a commitment. So you've got to kind of know your guys along those lines as well.
Okay, cool. So let's take a two, and we're still in at the JUCO level. The spring. What's the focus during the spring? Outside of winning, obviously winning games are super important, but what's the focus during in season, during the spring season?
I think in season, what you're going to really deal with at the junior college level is a lot of kids that are stressed out because they don't know where they're going to play yet. So I think that promotion of them and communicating to coaches, making sure that you're involved in the recruiting process for them with who they're talking to, making sure they're staying on point with their communication with other schools. That was a big focus for us because at the end of the day, I knew like winning games was important to us, but also like they came to school at a junior college to move on. So making sure that you're providing every opportunity for them to achieve their goals as a player. All the other stuff, I always felt like the fall was the time to do all the dirty work, man. So you put a lot of time into the fall, and then the spring, it's about playing and promoting guys and trying to get them placed.
Yeah, and then I assume that the administrative side, it's the same year round, trying to get guys to the next level, summer ball, fundraising, and all that stuff.
Yep. I think that kind of just goes year round.
All right, very good. So now you're picking up your family and you are heading to Montana State. What was that like? I mean, listen, coaches' wives are special. So what was that like for you, your wife, and your son?
Yeah, I think it was an exciting time, but a stressful time. I'm kind of a homebody. I grew up in Fruitland, Idaho. Ontario, Oregon was just across the river. It was my alma mater. I spent 9 years there. I don't think I would have ever left that place if it wasn't for my wife. She's always kind of been the one to see the bigger picture in our family and kind of give me a boost. She's my biggest fan. My son's my biggest fan. They love baseball. They love the players. So the transition for her was probably a little smoother than it was for me, to be honest. I think she was excited for that next opportunity. But kind of going through that process and obviously trying to find, the right assistant to go with me. So, that's where I called Ryan Wright. He was down at Cal State Northridge as a volunteer, and I called him and said, hey, I'm getting this job in Billings. You think you want to come up? And he packed his Subaru up and drove from LA to Billings in 3 days. And he met me in Billings and off we were running. The interesting thing was it was a late hire. The school had already started. Our guys were in session. So I spent, when I got the job, the next 2 days calling all of our current players at Treasure Valley, informing them of the change, and then also calling all the new players at MSU Billings. I lived in the dorms for 3 months. I never thought that my first time in the dorms would be when I was 30 years old, but they put me up in the dorms for 3 months, which was awesome for us as a staff, because it was a lot of late nights, early mornings, getting caught up, getting ready for the team. And then my wife, she's a rock star, man. She had a 1.5-year-old. She stayed home and she packed up the house all by herself, got it ready to sell. And then we finally got them moved out right around Thanksgiving time. And it was great to see them come out,
Yeah. Awesome. So now you're there, and you just left JUCO, and now you're part of the NCAA. And we talked about this a little bit, but what was like the biggest, oh, geez, when it came to the rules and the regulations?
Man, I was in the compliance office. Becca Gassner's our compliance officer here, and she's a saint, man. I owe her a lot in that first year. I was seeing her every single day, just as far as what we can and we can't do in the recruiting process, because obviously everything starts with the players. So recruiting was a big emphasis for us right off the bat. Understanding you can't pay for meals on the road for recruits, when you can bring them on campus, what you can do with them on campus. I mean, so that was a big adjustment for us. And she really helped us get through that. But yeah, I mean, baseball is baseball. Yeah. So I felt like a lot of the other stuff kind of ran pretty smooth. It was just making sure that we were doing everything by the guidelines and not breaking a bunch of rules.
Yeah, so unlike the last situation, you helped build that team that you took over. You recruited them, they all knew who you were. But here, you now went to a brand new program where a different coach brought these guys in. What was that process like? Getting them to buy in and understanding that, this is the way it's going to be. What was that process like? You don't know them, they don't know you, and we're all expected to go out there and win games.
Yeah, that's the exciting part about coming out was, MSUB is a pretty new program. So we were really excited about putting our name on something special, and Coach Bishop, who was here before me, did a tremendous job of turning it around. I mean, going from a team that was at the bottom to finishing at 500 to finally getting some winning seasons in there. So we felt like we were in a good spot as far as trying to build on that. We knew we had a really strong senior group, a group that was experienced. So it was a lot of meetings with those guys right off the bat to say, hey, listen, like, we're here to take this thing to the next level, and we need your buy-in to this. And it was a special group, man. Going through those guys, I mean, they bought in right away, and that made it a lot easier for the younger guys to continue to progress and make that transition as smoothly as we could. But yeah, I mean, anytime you go into a new place, you want to put your stamp on it and change some things. So, I mean, we were just very fortunate that we had a very accepting group that wanted more, that understood the vision was to not just win a conference, regular season championship, but to get to a regional, to get to a World Series. And so that buy-in happened pretty quick for them.
Nice. So do you get input from them? Do you try to get an idea of what they like or what they don't like? How does that work?
I think one thing is just setting your standard. Again, like I kind of mentioned earlier, we have a player's handbook. It's just a 10-page document of this is what we're going to do and why we're going to do it and how we're going to go about our business. So just making sure they understood like where I was coming from. And then I asked them too, I said, hey, what are some things here that like you guys feel are crucial to your success or traditions that you guys have that you want to keep and maintain? Because again, that shared ownership, I think people, they get excited about hearing new stuff, but they also, feel like they put input into something before you got there. So you want to make sure that they feel collectively, included in those decisions. And at the end of the day, you're the head coach and you got to make some tough decisions. But I think asking them what they had done before to have success, I mean, that's important, man. That communication is key.
Yeah, cool. So now, what changes with your practices, from the JUCO to the NCAA? Obviously, the goal and what you're trying to accomplish is all the same. But what changes now that you have the rules and the regulations?
Yeah, I laugh about this and I joke around with Ryan because he played for me at Treasure Valley, and we were probably a little crazy back in the JUCO days. And so you get to the 4-year program and you've got the rules and regulations. And the one thing I found in a hurry was you have to be really efficient. Like your practice planning is down to the last second, and we're rotating and we're moving on. Like when we get to the time frame, and if it's not right, like we're going to come back to it the next day. You can't sit there and beat a dead horse. So I thought the move for me really helped me just manage my time better. And then I mentioned it earlier, just making sure you're putting the right amount of time into the parts of the game that are going to help you win. So immediately we had to really evaluate our personnel and figure out what talent, skills do we have to have success on the field. I came from a wood bat league where, I mean, it was pitching defense. We stole a ton of bases. We bunted a ton. So now, like, we don't have team speed, and we got some big boys. So let's try to hit the ball in the gap and run it out of the yard. So we had to adjust, like, our philosophy around what players we had. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you mentioned that you went through a period of trying to figure out how to be more efficient. And it seems like you kind of documented more and really tried to figure out and really tried to reflect on it. How long does it take you to find something that works? Obviously these are things that you're always tweaking and making adjustments to, but how long does it take you to sit down and say, this is the most efficient thing we can do at this moment?
It probably didn't hit me until we got to the spring, because I never coached at the 4-year level yet, so I didn't know, what was out there as far as how good quality programs were ran. In the preseason, we went down and we played Colorado Mesa University, who's a powerhouse of Division II, and I think we took 2 out of the 4 games from them. But I just remember looking over in the dugout and seeing the way they did things, and I go, okay, that's what we got to get to. That's the team that is competing at the national level every year. So that's when it clicked for me on, like, what do we need to work on? We got to really pitch, and we really got to hit, and we got to defend at a higher level. And those were the things that we came back and we evaluated, and that's what we started putting our time into, with those 3 avenues. And as simple as that may sound, like, we didn't put time into the PFPs and the pick plays and all that stuff as much anymore. Like, let's hit, let's pitch, and let's defend. And I think that's, if you look at our 3 years here in all avenues, we've increased in those avenues every single year here. So we set a goal, and I think we accomplished that to some extent as we progress through our coaching careers here too as well.
Very cool. So you are player development focused. What kind of things are you tracking? Are you using technology? What kind of things are you tracking? And I'm talking on the player side, not the personal side. But on the player side, what type of things are you guys looking at, and what type of things are you tracking?
So a couple things I think that we track. We do a lot of ball exit speed stuff with our guys. We're big into generating bat speed. So we try to get a baseline test with them early, and then we kind of continue to go through that throughout the year with them. We do a lot of speed stuff, base running times. I mean, that really, to me, correlates, like, how are we doing in the weight room? Are we getting faster? Are we getting stronger? But those are the 2 probably from the offensive side of things. We film a lot, so that we have, film of guys' swings that we can go back and look at and see their progression as they go. And then defensively, just infield patterns. We try to put a watch to them, 2-step, 4-step patterns, things that we can see if we're improving. Because at the end of the day, I think players want to know if they're getting better. So track it for them and see where they're at along those lines. Pitching wise, we just have different stats that we track through the fall, 3-pitch mentality. We're big into tempo, so we have a stopwatch on them consistently as far as getting pitches off. Other small things like third down efficiency, which means, like, once you get to 2 outs, get off the field right away. So just some of those things that we track for them, that I think gives them a good idea of their progress and things that are important to us. And I think embodying or encompassing all 3 of those things, we love to compete. So when we're doing these things in practice, team settings, individual settings, we're constantly competing. We're putting scores to games. We're putting scores to the process inside those games, and then we're letting them know who wins at the end of the day. Because I really truly feel that competition is really the driving force behind player development. Like, you want your guys to get excited. You want your guys to play faster and become better players. Like, compete and track it and tell them who wins. And that way, they're not taking any days off. But yeah, those are probably the big areas as far as what we're tracking with those guys on a daily basis for them.
Cool. So, what about, if we were to measure your active ball speed, how do we do that without guys just totally losing fundamentals and just trying to chase the number?
Yeah, one thing we've done is when we do ball exit speeds, like, we put a square up in front of them, and that's going to be, however the distance is, it's going to be at about an 8 to 10 degree launch angle.
Okay.
And they got to hit it into that, because to reproduce a swing that's going to create an 8 to 10 degree launch angle, that's a line drive, and that's what our goal is, to hit line drives. Then they've got to be mechanically sound.
Yeah.
Like the hook ground
Yeah.
ball that a guy busts at 110, like we're not counting that. Like that's an out, man. So kind of giving them those external cues as far as what they're trying to accomplish with their swings, and then testing them in that.
Awesome. So we mentioned earlier how kids are different, and they're kind of getting a little bit harder to relate to. Because if we think about when Grandpa raised Dad, and Dad would raise us, and when we raised our son, when Grandpa raised Dad, he raised Dad the same way he was raised, because much hadn't changed. And then whenever Dad raised me, it was still a very similar approach. But now, we're in a culture, the culture's different. We have access to information, we have access to technology. The kids are getting a little harder to relate to in that sense. But as you get deeper into your coaching career, and this transition is happening, how do you relate? How do you work on that?
Yeah, I think number one, one thing I talk about a lot with our coaches is, like, we hear that a lot, like, hey, kids these days, like, and I'm sure they said that about us when we were growing up as well. And I think one thing for us as coaches that we try to stay consistent with is, yeah, kids are changing these days, but at the end of the day, like, they still want structure, they still want discipline, and it's on us as leaders to change that culture and to keep things consistent and for them as players. Because I think when we look at human beings, like, the deeper meaning for all humans is that they want to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. So communicating that to those kids, that, hey, we're going to be consistent, we're going to have a standard, we're going to hold you accountable, and they fit into that mold. I think as far as, like, the technology and how all those things have changed, like, as a coach, like, you've got to be a chameleon. You have to adjust to each situation you're going to be in. I tell guys every year, I've been coaching college baseball for 12 years, and every year I learned that I don't know anything about the game. Like, you have to have that growth mindset, that I'm going to adjust to the guys we're going to get, but I still keep my core values and my standards, and all that stuff has to stay the same for these guys, because they do want it. They really do. I've found if you get away from that, like, then that's when stuff goes haywire. Like, they want that structure. They want to be coached, and they want to have a leader in front of them,
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. And you mentioned communication. When you study successful coaches, and you're one, and I'm sure if there was a book out on you, it would mention how effective you are at communicating. So is this something that you always had, or is this something that you developed? What advice do you have for the young coaches that need to really improve on this skill?
I think it's like a baseball skill, man. Like, you got to develop it. Anytime you do something that's uncomfortable, like, it's going to be an opportunity to grow. And I can remember my first speech class, getting up there, and I think it was supposed to be a 5-minute speech, and I railed off that thing in about 2 minutes. And our speech instructor said, "Hey, Aaron, you got a lot of great content, but you got to slow down, man." So I don't think it's a skill that you just have. It's something like anything. Like, the more you practice it, the more comfortable you become, and the more efficient you become at it. And when you're not ready, then you got to prepare more. I remember as a young coach, getting ready to have team meetings and sit down conversations with kids, and having notes, like, written out, and being prepared with what my message was going to be, and practicing that in a mirror to see what that was going to look like for those guys, because communication is so crucial to any organization's success. So the guy at the top's got to be phenomenal at it. So you got to practice it, and you got to develop it. And when it's uncomfortable, keep preparing more,
So we've all been in a position where we said something that we wish we hadn't. And that's part of the learning process. So how do we communicate that to the guys?
I think when you mess up, and we're all going to mess up, we've all been there, showing that vulnerability and apologizing. Like, you got to own it. There's been plenty of times in my coaching career where I felt like we were doing what was right for the group, and it went completely the wrong direction. And getting up the next day, swallowing your pride, bringing the guys together, and hey, I screwed up, man. Like, I thought this was going to go this way, and it didn't, and I apologize. Like, I hope that you guys know that your best interest is always in our hearts. And I mean, just manning up, I guess, is the right term, because I think we expect that from our players, to own their mistakes, never pass the blame. As a coach, like, you have to reiterate that with them, and be that figure that if you're going to talk the talk, you better walk the walk as well with them, you know?
Yeah. And what about the coach that just doesn't have that awareness, you know, and they're probably not going to be a pretty successful coach, at least not for long. But maybe they're one's listening, and he's starting to think that I need to maybe start kind of paying attention and gain more awareness and self-evaluate himself. So can you talk about, you know, how you do your own self-evaluation?
Yeah, I think, you know, being honest with yourself, you know, going through that process of your development as a coach. I think a lot of times coaches feel like these successful guys, like, they don't have self-doubt. They don't, you know, question if they're doing it right. Like, everyone does. So, like, having those reflection days, you know, I have a notebook that I carry with me all the time, and I reflect back on things we do and how we felt, what was the feedback from the players, and then having that core group of guys on your team that you trust, that you can communicate with them and get feedback from the players as well. Like, I've always been that way, as far as, hey, I want to know what you guys feel. How is this working? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones following you, so you got to make sure it's working for them as well. Another thing I would say is find a mentor, find a great mentor that you can bounce ideas off, or great assistant coaches too, that aren't afraid to tell it how it is. I mean, me and Ryan have had some knockdown, drag out fights in the office, and we love each other, and we walk out of there, and we're still best buddies, you know, but we always try to keep things in perspective of what's best for those players. And sometimes we got to check ourselves as well.
Nice. So let's talk about the business side of baseball. What does that part entail?
I think, as a young coach, the operations of a program, a lot of times it's just the head guy that knows it. So I would suggest if you're a young guy and you're getting into it, like, shadow your head guy. Ask them if you can sit in on meetings. Ask them if you can go to meetings with administration, so that you get that experience. Because if you want to be a head coach someday, like, you need to learn all avenues of what makes the program run. Because there's things that, like, you're going to have to take into account as far as what's the budget like how do we increase our budget? Where do we have to add and subtract from? Roster moves, like, having those communications with players and exit meetings and their developmental plans, how you handling discipline, you know, and being consistent and having a plan, so that when things arise, like, you're prepared for those things. I think other things, like, as far as the business side of things, I always tell our assistants to have prepared is have a vision, man. Like, have a coaching manual. I know I've been working on one since the first day I started coaching, and I think it's up to 60 pages long now. Like, who are you as a coach, and why do you do things the way you do? I mean, we have the player's handbook that I always felt like was a business side of the thing that gives our guys guidance and direction. And then at the end of the day, like, be consistent with what you're doing and know you're going to screw up. Like, it's going to happen. And I think those business decisions that you're making, is a part of your growth and development as a coach, but it's also a crucial part to what makes a program go, you know?
Awesome. So what, you know, just real quick, you know, when you are talking with the administrative team, you know, what type of conversation do you guys have in terms of, you know, being on the same page with what the program trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think that communication relationship with your administration is crucial. We have a phenomenal athletic director here. Krista is a rock star. All the success we've had, like, she's been behind all that with us through this process. And so I think communicating your plan and your vision to your administration is key, so they know what you want to do, and make sure that you have buy-in from them. And then being honest and being realistic. Like, we had some 15-hour bus trips here when I first got here, and now we're making those into flights. But at first, like, I had to be realistic myself. Can we afford to fly? So having those tough conversations with your athletic director, and telling her, and not just coming in and asking like, hey, like, I want to fly on this trip. We need 25 extra thousand. Like, hey, we want to fly on this trip, but we're going to add this fundraiser in the fall that's going to make this amount of money. And this is X, Y, and Z. It's better on our guys' bodies, better for the student athlete experience. They're going to be in the classroom more, having the reason why and being prepared when you go present that information. ADs always appreciate the being prepared and detailed when you come and you ask for stuff, because they got a lot of people to look over. We got 40 dudes in that locker room we're looking over, where she's got a whole lot of leg department to look over. So make sure that you're respectful of her time and being prepared,
Yeah, awesome. So now, Coach, you're getting ready to head down to Fort Myers, Florida, my hometown. I went to Florida Gulf Coast University. I love that area. That's my place. And now you're going to be the manager of the Twins organization. Congratulations on that, by the way. So, what are you expecting that to be like?
Man, it's going to be a great opportunity to grow as a coach, as a person, and for our family. We always tell our players, like, nothing great happens when you're cozy and comfortable, man. And I'm about to get uncomfortable here really quick again. So we have been on the phone for the last 4 days, just trying to get prepared for that transition. And the one thing that I think really excites me, that I feel like with the Twins organization, a lot of their core values and what they hang their hat on aligns with our family's core values and what we believe in. And so I think that transition's going to be pretty smooth. And man, I can't tell. I never thought I'd be signing a pro contract and I get an opportunity to jump into pro ball as a coach. And it's like a dream come true. It really is.
That's awesome. So what's the conversation like with the guys at Montana State? Obviously, they want to see you do well and advance your career, but it's still tough. So what was that like?
It was tough. A lot of reach out from people when we got the job, like how excited are you? And I said, hey man, initially when we took the job, super excited, but then about an hour later, I'm going, man, I got to tell the guys, and that was the hardest part about this. So it obviously came as a big shock for them. We let them process it. And we kind of opened our doors, and me, my Ryan and myself were in our office for the whole next day. And I'm gonna be honest, man, we shed a lot of tears with some of those kids. And that really showed me that it really meant a lot to them, and it really meant a lot to us as a program, that we were doing it right. But every single one of those kids said, hey, while my heart's getting ripped out, like, we can't tell you how proud we are. We can't tell you how excited we are for you guys. So that really helped our healing process and got us going in the right direction. And fortunate for us, man, like, our ADs let us stay on here till January. So we're staying through this whole individual time. We're still putting our focus on development. And this last week has been phenomenal. I mean, our guys are getting better. They're getting after it. They're fist bumping us. And that's probably been the best part about this, is just seeing their excitement and their continuing to buy into what the big picture is for their season this spring, because they got a chance to do something really special, and I'm excited to follow them.
Very cool. So a couple more questions, if I can. What has been some of the best resources that have helped you develop as a coach and as a person?
There's a lot out there. Having a mentor, Coach Bauman was always a great mentor for me. Russ Wright was always a great mentor for me. Gary Van Tol, who's the new head coach at Boise State, I mean, he's been a huge mentor for me. So finding those guys that have been in the trenches, have done it the right way for a long time, that you trust, and those guys are there to help you. They want to help young coaches develop. So I would say that's number one. And then the ABCA has been a huge resource for me. I remember as a young assistant, I didn't have enough money. I was making $1,500 a year. Just to make ends meet, to put food on the table. I mean, I was buying the ABCA videos online and watching them in the office in the mornings. And now I'm fortunate enough I get to go to the convention every year. And that's a great resource for coaches to get in, get new ideas, meet new people, network, and then reading. I mean, as old school as it sounds, like, finding books that interest you and trying to develop yourself in all areas. I mean, I read a ton of books, military books, leadership books, baseball books, mental health books. I mean, just finding those little nuggets that are going to help you develop the young men that are underneath you.
Nice. So what would your favorite book, one that you highly recommend?
Man, I would say one that's kind of unknown that my dad actually turned on to me is a book called The Influencer. And it's a book that studies like higher organizations that are very successful and what they all have in common and how you influence people to see your vision. And that book was tremendous for me and just the way we develop leaders. So that's a little hidden book that not a lot of people know about that I really enjoyed.
Very cool. So one last question, Coach. If you were me and you were interviewing yourself right now, what question would you have asked that I didn't ask?
Man, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I always at the end, typically they're asking coaches what their hobbies are or something. So I maybe would ask what my hobbies are as far as with my downtime. But kind of a funny story about like hobbies. Coach Bob, one of my mentors, when he handed me the keys to the program at Treasure Valley, he said, "Hey, Suddy, like I know you love to fly fish. I know you love to golf, man. But I'm going to tell you what, like you show me a baseball coach that's a great fly fisherman or a great golfer, I'm going to show you a crappy baseball coach." So as a coach, I think you've got to be careful with having those hobbies and really putting your time into your job and your family and finding your downtime as well. But yeah.
Very cool. Well, Coach, thank you very much for coming on. We've covered a lot of things. You've poured it out, man, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Geoff. It's been a pleasure and a chance to share some info with you, and thanks for reaching out.